Hiya.
Here we are in Anacortes at a really nice, cool state park. What are we at here?
I think this is a city park, the city of Anacortes. It's a very cool place. Anacortes is a great progressive town. I mean, they really do a lot of stuff. They're very into the outdoors here.
Yeah, and coming in on the ferry this morning was absolutely gorgeous. I actually thought we were going to broadside a like a cargo freighter thingy, but they moved just in time that we went behind them. So coming across.
It's cool how they do that. They aim for them. They aim right for them.
It looked like they were.
And then that way it always stays ahead of them, and they can go around behind it.
I can believe that's true. I was in the front row again on the ferry, sitting in my truck, and it's like, should I video this in case we hit? And then it's like, no, I better worry about not drowning if we do hit. So, there's a squirrel too. So, okay.
So you spent a week in the San Juans.
Yeah, I was out on San Juan Island for 5 days, and I absolutely loved it. Yesterday, I sea kayaked for the very first time in my life.
And all around?
Yep, I did bike, and thank you very much for lending me your bicycle.
Did you eat crab?
I did eat crab on deviled eggs. So the restaurant right across the restaurant. No, dinner every night. So this restaurant that I fell in love with right across the street from my hotel with a deck overlooking Friday Harbor. And I sat there every evening the last 3 nights, and I had my dinner, which started with deviled eggs with crab on top, and then various seafood selections. Each time it was something different. So no, I absolutely loved it. Every night I had pina coladas, and I sat out there watching the boats and the seaplanes. So I was in heaven. It was great.
Did you bring anything back for your friend Dale?
Oops.
Like deviled eggs?
Oops.
Like crab?
Oops.
Like pina colada?
I returned
nothing. Nothing.
I returned your bicycle. Okay, so this is going to sort of be a spontaneous interview. I have not shared the questions with you ahead of time. So if you need time to think or say, Cynthia, I absolutely will not answer that because you're not allowed, or you will get another cease and desist or whatever. That's cool. So I just wanted everybody to know that watches this, we have not rehearsed this. Mm-hmm. Even though you and I spent 4 full days together and talked nonstop about Forrest, and you told me so many stories and blah, blah, blah. Some of this might duplicate that and not.
You know much more about Forrest than I know. So you should be answering the questions. And if I answer them wrong, just correct me, okay?
I'd love to do that. So, okay, so let's just start. I just want to start. I have 6 or 7 pages of notes, about 35.
That's more notes than I took in my entire time in college.
This is like all. I spent much of yesterday working on this because I wanted to be so prepared so that you didn't kick me out of the interview. And it's possible.
Yeah.
I've heard that you have. So anyway. Okay. Unless you want to talk about that, we'll just move right on.
We'll move right on.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to start with some of the current conversations that are taking place right now, and like in the past week, because there's been a lot of new excitement lately in the chase. It was dead for a while now. Just recently, new things are coming to light. So I just want to jump right into this stuff that's happening right now. The actual age of the treasure chest. Recently, Justin posted a picture of the bottom of the chest online, and it says, "Made in China." No, I'm kidding. It doesn't. Folks, I am kidding. It says "Made in France." Then there's like a specific stamp, and then it says bronze.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my question to you is, did Forrest ever talk to you about the age of the chest throughout the years?
Well, I mean, Forrest wrote several times on the blog about the age of the chest. And I can't remember what century he said that it was from. I do not remember that. But I do remember that immediately after he said that, folks found other images of the chest and decided that it was really made in the 20th century. and it wasn't terribly old at all, and that there were other versions of that chest that looked identical to it in various other places in the universe. And I think they found those on Google Images.
Yeah, so in TTOTC, Forrest actually says that an excited scholar, or whatever he called the guy, said it was probably a Romanesque lockbox that dated about 1150 AD. So, and then finally in the Ripley's Believe It or Not interview I think they filmed it October 13th, 2019, and I actually was there for that interview in Forrest's house. And I have my own recording of it as well. But you can even go online, and in Ripley's, the one that they posted on YouTube, that's the first time I think that Forrest actually said the chest is a couple hundred years old. So I mean, eventually by 2019, he wasn't saying anymore it was 1150. He actually said on camera during that interview what the real age was. So, okay. So for the old timers, this is not like new information, right?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, folks knew that the chest was much newer than Forrest had originally said. But I think Forrest believed that it was old, and it seems odd that he would be the one to believe it, since he was such a guy who collected, historic and prehistoric objects. You would think that he would have known above all people, and that he wouldn't have tried to knowingly pass it off as anything else. So it's a curious problem.
Yeah, and then so while we're on there's a lot of talk about the chest now, even more so than just the age. So I want to start off, before I forget, I'm going to talk about the olive jar. Did Forrest ever talk to you about the autobiography that's in the olive jar?
Forrest probably did talk to me about that autobiography, because at one time I was going to write Forrest's biography, and we talked a little bit about the biography that was in the olive jar, but not in terms of its content, but more in terms of whether or not we would be duplicating things, and if we did, was that a problem, and what should we write that's different than what would ever be released once somebody opened up that olive jar. So it was really in context of that. It wasn't in context of him telling me what was in there. But I think most of us believed that the autobiography that was in that jar was probably pretty much the same as the autobiography which he wrote, which has so many pictures in it that people now call the PDF, I guess. That it was probably very similar to that. Obviously, he wrote the two at different times, so there's bound to be some differences.
I think the consensus lately is that the autobiography that's in the olive jar is a condensed version of what is now being called the binder / the book / the PDFs. Right. I think, and you can correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but I'm pretty sure that over the years Forrest said he took out why the place was special to him in the one that he put in the olive jar. So in other words, the PDFs, which we'll talk more about in a minute if you want to, talk about, there's 5 paragraphs that have been removed from what the public ever had, and that is detailing his special place at 9 Mile Hole. So it seems to me that is what Forrest took out of the autobiography in the olive jar, because he said he took it out because it involved family members. And until John Collins Black actually reveals what it says, and maybe he never will, I absolutely do not know. We won't know unless John reads it or reads it to someone and they're allowed to report on it.
Yeah.
Comments?
No, I don't really have any comment. It makes sense that they would be different. Forrest wrote them at different times, and it does make sense too. Forrest always told me that the biography that was in the binder was intended for his family to read, and so there would, first, and so it it would imply that there were things in there that were very personal about his family, and maybe something about a feud or two. Who knows? Or maybe he would say something about somebody if it was meant for his family that he wouldn't say to the public. I mean, I do that all the time. For instance, I would never admit to the public that my mother was just a horrible cook, but I would certainly admit that to family.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. So, okay, so one more thing about the olive jar. Did Forrest at one time say, I know he said that he put he pulled some hairs from his head and put in there, right? For DNA down 1,000 years from now or whatever he said. Did he also say he put toenail clippings in there, or is this just a wild rumor?
No,
do you remember that?
Yeah, he did say that. He did say he put some toenail clippings in there and some hair. And I think the reason he put the toenail clippings in there was because somebody told him that unless he had, the roots of the hair, they couldn't get any DNA out of it. So he probably said, well, oh hell, I better put something. And he checked around and fingernail and toenail clippings. And why toenail clippings? Because he was probably clipping his toenails when he thought about it.
Okay, so...
And also for the shock value. I mean, Forrest loved to shock people, and I think a lot of people miss out on the fact that Forrest had a great sense of humor, and he would say things sometimes just to see what kind of a reaction he'd get, and that could very well have been one of them.
Yes, but let's look at it from a standpoint of today. This is like August something 2023. So would it be ironic, funny, or whatever if John Collins Black paid, I can't remember what he paid for the olive jar, but I think it was like in the $30,000 range.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be interesting if John opens the jar and has toenail clippings, and Justin, who now has the chest, removes that wood lining and has the second poem? I mean, who knows? Hopefully we'll find out those things eventually. I don't know.
Yeah, that whole second poem thing. I was really shocked when Jack said to me, I asked him what the second poem was, or not what the second poem. I asked him what the poem was that was in the chest, and I think I had to ask him that question twice, because the first time he didn't answer, and he probably didn't answer because he probably went back and looked in the chest for a poem or whatever, or maybe he just thought I was crazy. But eventually he told me there was no poem in the chest. He said unless it's in the olive jar, which I have not opened.
Right, and that's still a very distinct possibility, is that there is a second poem and that it is in the olive jar. But let's suppose that there is a second poem and it's under the lining, which is possible. David Old, Shiloh's dad, made the wood lining, right? Some people think that's new information never shared, and it's like someone then said, no, it was talked about in Chase chat, 10 years ago. So it's not really new information, it's just forgotten information. But, okay, so... Well,
I can remember something else Forrest said about that wood lining that turned out apparently not to be true. Forrest, when folks were considering the line in the poem that reads, when folks were considering the line in the poem that reads in the wood, they were considering the fact that lining was wood, and that he was referring to the fact that it was in the chest. And Forrest said, first of all, folks had asked him over and over and over again what kind of wood that chest was lined with, and I don't think Forrest knew. I can't remember what his answer was to that, but he, it was a factoid that he probably forgot to ask, or didn't care about, or didn't remember. But I can remember him saying, listen, he said, the longer that chest sits out there, the more moisture that wood will absorb. The lid is closed, but moisture is going to get inside. And he said that wood is going to be shrunk, warped, soaked with water. He said there's no telling what condition that wood would be in. Now, given all that he knew that moisture was going to affect that wood, why would he put an unprotected piece of paper that had a poem that was crucial to identifying the real finder underneath that wood. It doesn't seem logical to me, but on the other hand, it doesn't mean that he didn't, coat it in plastic or put it in a plastic baggie or in some way protect it. But just off the top of my head, it seems unlikely that he would have put that poem.
There's another theory that maybe it's in metal. Could he have etched it into a piece of metal that would withstand the test of time more? And back to you just saying that it wouldn't be logical maybe to put a piece of paper in there and have it last a long, long time. Forrest put a blaze on a tree. There is absolutely no logic, in my opinion, anymore of what Forrest was considering logical at the time. So, I mean, if he put a blaze on a tree that can blow over, then, I mean, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. We know that many of the early American explorers blazed trees that were found 200 years later.
Yes.
So, Forrest was unlucky in the tree that he picked, but so were probably a lot of the early explorers carvings in trees. The other thing is, it kind of leads one to think that Forrest really never expected the chestnut to be found relatively quickly.
So you think he did think it would be found quickly?
I'm not saying I think that. I think it's a possibility. And so why not carve it in a tree? Why not even a dead tree that's likely not to be standing in 10 or 20 years? I mean, if you think that your poem is, and this happens to all writers, you get close to what you write. You don't see the difficulty in interpreting it. I don't think Forrest thought his poem was difficult to interpret. I think he thought that people would figure it out relatively quickly. I think that whole idea of that chest lasting, 10,000 years before anybody found it is crazy. I think Forrest really and truly intended for it to be found. I think he wanted it to be found. I think he had a whole scenario in mind for the finder and him, and newspaper stories and congratulations, and I think Forrest really did want it to be found, at least initially, right away.
So you mean in his lifetime too?
Well, yes,
from what
absolutely.
You're saying.
Yeah, I think he figured 10 years it'd be found within that period.
Yeah, well, it pretty much was.
So,
Wasn't
okay. Isn't that a coincidence?
Isn't it? And people have certainly pointed that out before. I always was under the impression that Forrest thought it would never be found in his lifetime.
Yeah.
So he wasn't around to answer any of these questions, or he thought he wouldn't be around to answer any of the questions or the controversies or whatever. But then, and we'll talk about the ending more here in a little bit.
But what controversies? When Forrest hid that chest, there were no controversies. It was a treasure hunt. He wrote a poem, follow the poem, go get the chest, you lucky devil, you're a millionaire, or whatever. I mean, it was just a fun thing. There were no controversies involved. There were no questions. I mean, Forrest never imagined. He imagined somebody would bring the chest to him and they would say, "So what's the provenance on this piece?" I'm sure he imagined those questions, but he didn't imagine all the crap that went on. That's what tired him of the chase. That's what got to him. And as people have said, it may even be what killed him.
Yeah, so before we move away from the chest too much, one of the questions that people wanted me to ask you is, do you know what happened to the emerald ring that initially was in the chest but removed before Forrest hid the chest?
Okay, I've never said this before, but yes, I have the emerald ring. Forrest gave it to me. No.
No, you don't, because I have it. Oh my God, there were 2 emerald rings and we each have an emerald ring.
Well, there you go.
Jeez,
I wonder
Louise.
who else has one.
Damn, I think Zoe has one, from what I heard. Okay, no, I'm serious. Did he ever talk about the emerald ring not being there when he hid it? Because it was intentionally removed by the family because it was not his to give away.
No, but as everyone who was on the blog in the early years knows, Forrest said over and over again that he wasn't even sure what was in the chest, which I always found to be odd because Forrest was such a record keeper. He can give you in detailed provenance on practically everything in his collection, and he had notes on it, and it was like a museum. He had everything cataloged. So I find it really odd that he didn't catalog everything that went into the chest. But nonetheless, that is what he said, and he said it over and over again. He said, I exchanged items in the chest before I hit it. What's in that photograph may not even be what was in that chest. I don't really honestly remember, Forrest said, what was finally in that chest.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense of anything. So, okay, so you let me read the whole cease and desist order that you got from the Fenn estate lawyer, and I think it would be cool if you would tell your side of the story regarding that whole situation, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. Well, my theory has always been that I would like to, I mean, that's what the blog was all about. It was about sharing. The idea was that as group think, when I started the blog, with a group think, we might come up with a solution to the poem. And the other idea was, well, it would be fun to share experiences that we all had. We had fun while we were out looking, and people wrote their stories, and they had fun too. It wasn't just me and you. A lot of folks had fun out there looking, and I thought it would be encouraging the chase, which is what Forrest wanted, encouraging people to join the chase if people were out there and were having fun. And so that's what the blog was. Those were the two reasons that the blog was started. And I continued in that. I mean, I tried to share, even after I took down the blog, I tried to make sure people still had access to the scrapbooks and all of Forrest's other writings that were on the blog. You know, I completely forgot about that PDF, that book, the binder. That material was in a different place. I kept it with the still images for because there was a series of still images.
There were images, right?
And so it wasn't with the videos, and it wasn't with the audios that I was keeping that I had done with Forrest, and it wasn't with the other things that I had digitally stored away on my server for Forrest, or from Forrest. So I had completely forgot about it. And then one day I was going through pictures. I was just going through images that we had taken at various times while in Santa Fe. And I ran across those, and I said, "Holy shit! I forgot about these things." You know, I'll bet, you know, that the searchers would like to see this. And that's all it was just an attempt to share that material. I didn't realize, I mean, Forrest gave me permission. Why else would I have those images of that binder if Forrest didn't? In fact, he gave it to me overnight. I took it back to the Airbnb where Kathy and I were staying, and I photographed it that evening and brought it back the next day. Forrest said, "Yeah, go ahead and take it." And Forrest gave me permission to use and to share what was on there. I don't remember that there was any stipulation involved in that. Forrest was comfortable at that point with me sharing what was on there. And I had simply forgotten about it. And when I saw it, I wanted to share it. I thought that folks would really enjoy seeing that. It never occurred to me that it was anything other than something Forrest gave me that I could share. It went up, I think, on a Monday, and I think on a Thursday night I received the cease and desist order from Carl, the Fenn's attorney. I also got a text message from Shiloh, at least I think it was Shiloh's phone anyway, and it said, "Shame on you." It said, as my mother would say, "Shame on you." And when I first got that text message, I didn't recognize Shiloh's number, so I didn't know who it was, and I didn't know what they were talking about. And then I got the note from Carl, and I realized who the note was probably from, the text was probably from, and what he was talking about. I assumed, as soon as I got that from Carl, that note, the cease and desist note, that it meant that Shiloh wanted to publish that thing and charge money and make some dough at it, and that was his intent, not to not have it shared, but to make sure he got a good cut of people paying good money to get at that particular binders worth of content. So I expect at some point the Fenn family, or Shiloh at any rate, will release that in a book form that'll probably cost an arm and a leg, and everyone will have to pay to get at it. And I think that's too bad, particularly since Forrest gave me permission to release it to the searchers.
I have a lot of things going through my head right now. I will stay silent on this subject for now. I just get in trouble if I talk about it. So
When has that ever stopped you?
oh man, the phone calls that I get sometimes, it's like, is it, I don't know. I have to decide if stuff is worth that phone call that I'm going to get. So in this case, I already made my opinion known pretty much so on Discord when I had my red button meltdown right after you got that cease and desist. And, you know, it was bad behavior on my part, and I certainly don't want to go there again. So I'm just not going to say anything more about this subject. So, and one other thing on my first page before I forget. Oh, two things. Do you want to talk about the coin that you received out of the blue during or after Heritage Auction? A coin from the treasure chest.
Oh yeah, that was very cool. So I received, I think it was a shipment via FedEx. One day, I did not expect it. After the I guess it was after the auction, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah.
It was after the auction.
That sounds right.
Yeah. I received. I opened up this envelope, and it was a beautiful gold coin, and it was wrapped, and it was you know, just how it was set up for the auction. It was marked Fenn from the Forrest Fenn chest, and it had been authenticated.
Right.
And I couldn't believe it. I had no idea that I was going to get that, and in fact, I didn't even know. I've been so out of it. I didn't even know who the hell bought the chest
Right.
from Jack.
Right.
I didn't even know that Jack sold the chest. I mean, I just haven't been paying any attention whatsoever. And the only there was a return address on it, but it was to an attorney firm in Texas, and it was, you know, I didn't know who had bought it. I didn't know who it was from, or whoever thought to send me a piece of it. I was very grateful, and I wanted to make sure that the person knew that I was grateful, whoever they were. So I looked up that address. I discovered it was an attorney. I called the attorney's office, and I said, listen, you know, I got a thing in the mail, and, you know, it's part of it. And right away they started to put me off. You know, they thought I was trying to hose whoever
Right.
for something,
Yeah.
and I wasn't. All I wanted to, so I finally settled them down, and I said, look, all I want to do is make sure that whoever sent this, I'm not after the person's name. I just want them to know that I really, really appreciate the fact that they sent me a piece from Forrest treasure chest, and I'll treasure it forever. And I just want you to know that. Just please pass that on for me. And I did. And they said they would. And a little while later, I heard from the person that purchased the chest, and they said, you're entirely welcome.
And at that time, did that person identify who they were? Or did they just still say LLC? Or did Justin actually just come out and say, hey, I'm Justin Posey and I sent you the coin?
I can't answer.
Okay. You don't recall? So you don't recall?
I do recall, but I can't. I was asked not to reveal that person, and even though everybody believes they know who it was, I can't contribute to that. I haven't been released from my promise.
That is fair. That's a very good answer. Okay, so, and one more thing, which has nothing to do with anything we've talked about yet. Forrest has said 1,000,000 times he was a collector, and he talks a lot about the Arrowhead collections he had, his own, he bought his dad's, I think he bought Concy's eventually, blah, blah, blah. Did Forrest ever talk to you about the ball of string story in TTOTC? Do you know what I'm talking about, where he collected pieces of string and then he made this ball of string? that, I mean, I don't think there's even a conspiracy much about what that story meant, metaphor, literal. Did he ever talk about that?
I'm thinking, did Forrest ever talk about the ball of string? No. I remember it coming up because he also wrote that story for the blog, or rewrote that story a little bit for the blog. And and I remember at the time that came out, folks were complaining about how in the hell could his family not have known he was collecting a ball of string that was so big it took up that much space in his room, and his brother never even noticed it. That kind of stuff that was going on. Like the hints were that maybe Forrest was making some of this stuff up. Maybe it wasn't all real. Maybe it wasn't intended to be real. And maybe there was a reason for that story other than an anecdote from his life history, because it's so peculiar it doesn't make sense. And I can remember that discussion, but I cannot remember that Forrest ever talked with me about it other than a mention of it at some point when I was over at his house. I do remember him saying, and that ball of string story or something like that, got everybody going with that one or something like that,
Yeah.
and that's all.
Yeah, the only reason I thought that it might really, there's a reason for it, is because it was actually in TTOTC. And, he had limited number of pages for that book. And My War for Me took up, a third of the book or whatever. So I find it peculiar as well that story was in there. But it is a cool story, and maybe that, I don't know,
But that's like trying to, why one story more than another be relevant to the chase that was in that book? Why would one, it seems like either they all were or they all weren't. It just seems like a coincidence to me, that one of them would be applicable to finding the treasure chest. The ball of string, the string you had to use to get to the, that kind of thing.
Oh. You just said the string that you have to use to get to. Did Forrest? No, that's wonderful. That segues into another question. It might not be in the order, but since you said that, we'll go there now. Did Forrest ever talk to you about the 150-foot line, string, cord, fishing line, whatever you want to call the material? Did he ever talk to you about how he, on the day he hid the chest, how he ran a line so he could find the spot again on his second trip?
Not to me, he didn't. No.
Damn. Okay.
Did he to you?
We're going to just move on from this now, okay? Oh. No, I just wanted...
So something you don't want to talk about. You want to keep this from the searchers.
I've already talked about it on the blog, so yeah. Like I said, I'm trying to limit the phone calls.
All right.
So, yeah.
No,
so I'm trying to...
Forrest and I did not talk about how to find the chest, where the chest was. I didn't ask him direct questions about the chest. That was never my intent, because I did not want Forrest to think I was trying to weasel information out of him. I didn't want to be a weasel by Forrest. Other people didn't care. Other people didn't care if they looked like a weasel. I did.
Okay, in defense of me knowing about the 150-foot string, I knew nothing until after the chest was found. So he never really, he never told me anything that helped me either, obviously, or obviously you too much, since we didn't find it. I was never even close. Let's talk, though, about one thing, because I want you to do this on camera, on record, regarding the fact that where Warm Waters halt is Madison Junction. I want you to say to my face on camera, I told you so. Come on, Dale. You got to say, I told you so. You told me so. You told me, I don't know how many times, that you thought, in your opinion, the first clue was Madison Junction.
Yeah, I don't remember when I finally figured that out, but I do remember going to Madison Junction several times to survey the area. It just seemed like an appropriate place. It was a place Forrest had to pass on his bicycle every time he went to his swimming hole. Nowadays there's a bookstore there and a ranger station. I'm sure he would have popped in once in a while. or saw people there. It was an interesting spot, you know, where three of the warmest rivers in Yellowstone joined together. And it just seemed like an important place in Forrest's personal stories of Yellowstone. Although he never wrote a story about Madison Junction, as far as I'm aware. Did he? No.
Only to me. I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding.
Oh.
Man, I can't believe I pulled that over your eyes.
Well, he told
Man.
you lots of things he never told me.
Well, our relationships, I think our relationships were like really, really different with Forrest. But no, I was kidding. Forrest never told me Madison Junction. Everything I learned was after Jack found the chest. So, okay, just to make that clear.
And so I'm putzing around in Madison Junction, and I can remember I get out of Esmeralda one day. I park in front of a big sign there in that parking lot, and I get out and I decide to read the sign, and the sign says that this is, I can't remember the exact words, but I took a picture of the sign. I couldn't believe it. You know, this is the place where warm waters halt. This is the place where three of the warmest three? Yeah.
Well,
no, two.
Two that make
two of the warmest rivers
that make one
join
ring.
together and form it.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree.
And so it just fell into place for me that must be the place. I certainly had no other place that would work for me. I went back and forth between Madison Junction and the hot spring Ojo Caliente for a while because I felt it could be either. But as somebody pointed out, you know, it wouldn't make any difference which one you started at. Really, you could still get to 9 Mile Hole, but I just really felt particularly after I read that sign, and it made so much sense to me because I always thought that, I mean, Forrest said you're nowhere if you don't know where warm waters halt. If you don't know the first clue, you can't find the rest. And so it seemed to me that it had to be a place that people could figure out. And what better place than a place with a big sign that said, this is where warm waters halt. Oh my God, you know? And we're, you know, millions of people stop by every year and look at this thing. It just seemed to me to be the right place. It was the kind of clue, you know, I mean, it took me, 6-7 years to figure that part out. And even so, I had doubts. I mean, it wasn't like I absolutely 100% believed, but I believed strongly that it was better than anything else I or anyone else had come up with. Except, well, not, you know more about this than I do, except how do you decide that 9 Mile Hole is the home of Brown? There's no sign there. I looked, it says home of Brown.
There is now. No, I'm kidding. So, no.